Imagine, you come to do a routine night cleaning and stumble upon a portrait of yourself, aged 5. Who put your past on display and why? Good day to all. Write in the comments what city or country you are watching from now. And support the video with a like and a subscription. This story will change your perception of people. The clock on the dashboard of the old Fiat flashed 10:41 p.m. as Sophia Green pulled out onto a narrow road winding between dark cypresses. The rain the meteorologists had promised was still lingering somewhere over the sea, but the air was already filled with that damp smell that southern cliffs breathe before a thunderstorm. The headlights slid along the mossy stone of the roadside, picked out the road signs, private property, and then went out, as if they themselves were afraid to spoil the silence of the night. Sophia was on her way to the night shift, to wash crystal, polish marble, and pick invisible specks of dirt from gilded panels. From inside the tiny car came the clatter of windshield wipers and the rustle of a bag of rubber gloves. The cleaner, that was what they called her at the agency, although formally her job title was Night Cleaning Specialist for Elite Interiors. Her shifts rarely coincided with the schedules of ordinary people. When restaurants turned off their windows, theaters closed their backstage, and wealthy owners of castles propped up their heavy doors with bolts, Sophia was just going on stage. But today's scene was special. Villa Lancaster, built on the edge of a cliff at the beginning of the last century, belonged to a family that was written about in the local newspapers: collectors, philanthropists, lovers of private candlelit dinners. Access was granted only by one-time passes with the initials LL engraved on them. When the agency dispatcher named the property, Sophia even asked again if there was a mistake. She was told, "No mistake. Everything needs to be removed by morning. They are paying double the rate. Do you take it?" She took it, because money was rent for a small studio apartment near the train station, pills for the cat, and her younger brother's annual college fees. There wasn't enough money as usual. Sophia stopped at the wrought iron gates. The touch panel blinked a greeting, as if it recognized her. For a second, the girl thought that the logo of the installation company was engraved with the letter S. It was just a hallucination in her tired eyes, she decided, and rolled out onto the circular driveway covered with wet magnolia petals. The night porter, a grey-haired gentleman with the face of a British butler from an old movie, checked Sophia's badge, nodded politely, and ushered her inside as if she were a long-time guest. The transition from the cold outside to the warmth of the lobby was like dipping your hands in ice water and milk. The marble walls were warmed by a warm stone system, and the air was filled with the subtle scent of polish with notes of rosemary. "Your inventory has already been delivered, Signora," the porter whispered. "Floor battens, clean parquet, gold paste for the frames. Everything is in the utility room near the mirrored staircase." While he was speaking, Sophia studied the ceiling. There, between the cassette frescoes, an ornament of acanthus leaves curled. At the joints of the fragments, a tiny monogram L was gilded. An endless repetition of the letter, reminding the heroine of school copybooks. Lancaster knew how to leave a signature. "Thank you," she replied. The porter's smile lingered long enough for Sophia to notice a slight pity in his eyes, as if he wanted to warn her about something but couldn't. Sophia changed into her uniform, grey striped trousers, a light sweatshirt, and an apron with the agency's embroidery over it. She gathered her hair into a bun and hid it under a black cap. She took an old player out of her bag, but didn't turn it on. The sounds of the villa seemed more worthy of any music. The first corridor greeted her with the hum of ventilation. To the left was a glass wall with a view of the night sea. Waves were beating against the rock, splashing flashes of phosphorus, and Sophia, forgetting about the rag, looked down. 20 meters of sheer drop and a black abyss, keeping its secrets. A hum was heard. The elevator stopped at the Galleria floor. It was time for work. She started in the large reception hall. Hundreds of candles, set in candelabra, flickered like lines of manuscript on parchment. Sophia twisted the lid of the polishing machine, pouring in yellow wax, smelling of lemon and old furniture. The machine moaned, its rollers trembling muscularly. The girl moved it across the floor, and the stone became smooth, like a lake under frost. Reflections of candles danced in the marble, golden comets, greenish halos. Sophia involuntarily smiled, looking at the unearthly fire under her feet. By 11:15 p.m., the first room was shining like a plate after washing. Sophia moved into a long gallery where paintings by European modernists hung. The room was called the Corridor of Shadows. The lights were positioned to highlight every brushstroke. It was here that something happened that broke her usual work rhythm. At the back of the gallery hung a portrait. Not a canvas, but a photograph, a delicate print on frosted glass. A girl of about 5, blonde, wearing a red coat. Her hands were in mittens, her gaze was straight into the lens. There was something adolescent and serious about her expression, which made the photo seem older than the date 1999 etched at the bottom. Sophia froze. Her subconscious raised a wave of forgotten things, the smell of the orphanage teacher's dusty overcoat, the corridors where she took her first steps, the prickly stiffness of the wool blanket, and that look. Her look. The girl grabbed the bucket with both hands, feeling her knees begin to buckle. Her heart was a drum. Her brain was feverishly whispering, "Coincidence, double phenomenon, you're tired." She took a step closer. In the mitten in the photo there was a small grey ornament, the letter S. Sophia automatically felt her wrist, where a barely noticeable birthmark, similar to a comma, was hidden under the sleeve. In the photo, the same dot. The Polish scent was suddenly replaced by the metallic taste of blood in her mouth. Her fingers trembled and a drop of wax slid onto her boots, a hot bite. Sophia felt no pain. "Is the night generous with miracles, señorita?" A baritone voice came from behind. The girl shuddered and turned around. A young man in a gardener's overalls stood in the gallery doorway. Tall, with broad shoulders, hair the color of wet pine bark, and a pair of pruning shears in his hands. Sophia was at a loss for words. He approached, stepping softly on the freshly cleaned marble. "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you," he smiled. "I am Marco. I watch the greenhouse at night. We're colleagues on the dark front." Sophia nodded. Her inner voice commanded her to leave, but her feet were rooted to the floor. "The painting is powerful," Marco continued, turning to the portrait. "I always wonder who this little girl is. Some of the guests seem familiar." Sophia swallowed. "You think? Me?" He shrugged. "Yesterday, when they were replacing the backlight, I noticed something strange. On the back of the frame it says, 'Unearthed,' as if the photo was found, not taken." Sophia felt a shiver run down her collar. "Dug up" is a verb used for hiding places, not family photos. "I'm sorry," she managed to say. "I need to get back to work." Marco nodded, but his gaze never left her face, as if he were trying to piece together a puzzle from familiar pieces. Finally, he moved toward the door, and Sophia heard the pruning shears snap, sharply, like a whip. 23:48. Sophia tried to turn on the audiobook. She couldn't concentrate. Every mirror reflected the girl's red coat, as if the frame was printed on polished stone over and over again. She went to the utility room for more bronze frame cleaner. The utility room was hidden behind a mirrored staircase, a marvelous architectural whim. The steps themselves were glass, with white LEDs underneath. When you walked, it seemed as if you were climbing a moonlit path above the sea. Sophia, walking up, counted the steps. 1, 2, 3. On the 21st, the lights went out. The villa fell silent. All the lights went out at once. There was no electricity, but emergency lights lit up along the baseboards, showing the way with orange crumbs. Sophia inhaled. The polish immediately gave off an alcoholic taste, mixed with ozone and, damn, smoke. She put the bucket down, touched the wall, and moved along the corridor. The smoke grew stronger. A second, and a flash. At the end of the corridor, old oil lamps lit up, as if someone had flicked a match. Marco stood by the lamp. His overalls were glowing amber, his eyes catching the same glare. "The power grid is acting up," he said. "But the holes won't be left in the dark. We have antique solutions." Sophia exhaled, feeling her chest pounding. "Does this happen often?" she asked. "After the storm, yes. Come on, I'll show you a detour. There's an old elevator for servants by the stairs. It's independent of the main network." Sophia shuddered. A fresh cold draft hit from the ceiling. It smelled of sea salt. The elevator was a separate shaft lined with brick. Marco pulled the handle. The grate slid, revealing a small cabin where a kerosene lantern hung. "Down?" he asked. "I'm not finished upstairs yet." Sophia tried to keep her voice even. "There's only a reserve burning there. There's barely enough light. I'd like to accompany you, if you don't mind." He entered first. Sophia stepped hesitantly over the threshold. The grate clanged, the cabin moved. Outside, shadows crawled along the shaft, like ink along the cracks of paper. "Tell me about the photo," Marco said unexpectedly. Sophia tensed. "You see him often. I notice how people react. But you—" He searched for words. It was as if you were looking in a mirror. "It's a coincidence," Sophia said quickly. "The girl just looks like her." Marco was silent for a while. Then, "I once saw a film of this girl running through the rose garden of this same villa. The film was without sound, but I'm sure she was laughing." Sophia looked at the edge of the boots. Film. Rose garden. She closed her eyes and the music of the carousel came to mind, although she could not have had such a memory. There were no carousels in the orphanage. The elevator hit the bottom. The basement was cool, smelling of damp stone and the arsenal of an old castle. While Marco was figuring out the lantern, Sophia glanced down the corridor. On the left, a door with a sign saying Fototeca. The lock was brass, but rust had eaten away the crack. Marco saw the direction of her gaze. "The old archive is kept there. The grandfather gardener brought the key, but now it is with the manager." Key. Suddenly Sophia remembered. Under the carpet of the gallery, where she was washing the floor, her finger had caught something metallic. At the time she didn't pay attention to it. She was fussing over the portrait. "Do you know these corridors well?" she asked. Marco took a step closer. "I grew up here, but some doors are closed to me, just like you. The Lancaster family keeps secrets more carefully than vintage wines." At that moment, the red light of the emergency lamp flickered, reminding them that the work was at a standstill. Sophia pulled herself together. "I need to finish the halls." "Will you help me raise the lanterns?" Marco nodded, his shoulders tensing like ropes. With a wheeze, but without effort, he turned the generator lever. Some of the lamps overhead came to life, casting long beams. "I'll lift the kerosene to the portrait gallery," he said. "Is that enough for you?" "Yes, thank you. And Sophia?" For the first time, he called her by name. "If anything seems strange again, call me. We're on the same side of the night here." Sophia found herself trusting someone other than herself for the first time that evening. She didn't know then that this person would become the only thread that would lead her out of the darkest labyrinth. Returning to the mirrored staircase, she laid down a new layer of wax, rubbing the paste in with a passion, as if trying to erase the thought of the portrait. Scarcely 10 minutes had passed when the first drops of rain began to roll down the marble. The glass dome above the atrium had developed a small leak. Sophia glanced up. Lightning flashed through the transparent roof, gilding the Gothic ribs of the structures. With a rag in her hands, she ran to the pantry for buckets, but on the way her gaze caught a trail of drops. They ran straight to the base of the statue of the Virgin Muse. There the floor had caved in slightly. Brass gleamed. Sophia sat down. The carpet had folded back, revealing an air duct grate. Something was glittering in the slit. She hooked the object with a nail, a brass key engraved with the letters SL. SL. The name of the villa is Lancaster, but the S? Sophia squeezed the teeth with her palm. The metal burned. The lanterns were waiting in the gallery. The ghost of coincidences haunted her, and her work demanded her usual precision. She put the key in her pocket, having made a decision to drop by Phototeca after her shift. Thunder rumbled outside, and it seemed to the girl that the villa coughed, an old heart-rending cough. A second thunder, and the lamps flickered like dull echoes. The raindrops grew louder, and her heartbeat synchronized with the rain. It would have been a normal night shift, if not for the girl in the photograph, if not for the gardener's gaze, if not for the key that for some reason belonged to her. Sophia lifted the lantern onto the mop, lit the wick, and, lighting the way, walked back to the gallery, where the girl's portrait now seemed clearer. The fiery crimson light gave its glass a mystical glow. Unearthed, as if someone had pulled her past out of the ground and hung it up for all to see. Marco walked quietly behind him. In his hands was another lantern. The two lights met on the marble, weaving a path of golden bunnies that seemed to laugh at the mere fact of their existence. Sophia straightened up, threw the spatula into the bucket, and laughed for the first time that evening. It was as if the thin strings had snapped from the tension and the sound had spilled out. Marco stopped, surprised, but smiled back. "What's funny?" he asked. Sophia shook her head, looking at the reflections of water on the ceiling. "I don't know," she said. "Maybe it's because for the first time I feel like I'm not a guest, but part of this place." "Then the villa chose you," Marco said seriously. "Nothing happens here by chance." Sophia looked at the portrait again. The girl in the red coat was smiling, or was it her imagination? Damn, too many shadows. But somewhere deep in her soul, a string trembled, giving out a chord of recognition. The night was just beginning. Ahead were corridors, locked doors, and an archive that was waiting for the brass key SL to touch its rusty heart. Irua Sanders Obons 03, Villa Lancaster was breathing rain. The damp shutters creaked as if asking to let the storm in. Drops were still drumming on the glass dome, but the thunderclaps were moving towards the sea, freeing the night sky from its wrath. Sophia Green stood at the foot of the mirrored staircase, feeling the barely perceptible aroma of kerosene mixed with the ether of lemon wax rising from the lamp in her hands. She had left the bucket, mop, and all the rest of the household at the portrait gallery. The floor there already shone as if covered with fresh ice. Now all that was left was to work on the bronze frames and pilasters in the ballroom. But the heart was in no hurry to obey the work routine. In the head beat the image of a brass key with the initials OS, dies L. It lay in the pocket of the apron and warmed up, as if absorbing anxiety from the body. S. Sophia L. Lancaster. Too direct a coincidence to be a joke of the universe, but too impudent to be taken seriously. She blew out the lamp decisively, plunging herself into the semi-darkness of the backup lighting. Stepping on the wet marble, Sophia moved toward the service corridor. She needed a first aid kit. The cut on her finger, received while cleaning the glasses, was aching louder and louder, leaving crimson marks on her sleeve. The service corridor forked. The left one led to the kitchen, where the duty team prepared an early breakfast for the owners. The right one led to the fireplace hall, a long gallery decorated with fireplaces, each made of a different type of, marble. Sophia chose the right one. She had not yet cleaned here, which meant she could rest without prying eyes. The door to the gallery opened stiffly, as if sighing. The door scraped the traveling dust particles into the space, where it smelled of old fuel, bitter smoke, and slightly of bay leaf. One of the cooks was probably drying herbs by the fire. The light of the emergency tapes crawled along the floor like a red snake. In the very center of the hall stood a round walnut table, on it a silver tray with 10 boxes, carved smoky glass, porcelain, bone, turquoise. "Looks like an antique exhibition," flashed through my head. Obviously in the morning the owner would want the exhibits to shine. Sophia came closer, and the light from the lamp wick shook the glass lid of one of the boxes. Under it was a white gold ring. Engraved on the inside was S's. E.L. She flinched, the cut aching again, and blood stained the edge of the cardigan in her hand. "Fabulous, isn't it?" A voice came from the doorway. A thick British O baritone, the family's lawyer, Mr. Wallace. Dark tailcoat, silver watch chain, and eyes like X-rays, scanning and cataloging. "I'm cleaning up before the morning round." Sophia quickly pressed the rag to her finger and raised her eyes. "I didn't know the exhibition had begun." "The exhibition began a century ago," Wallace smiled coldly, "and it still hasn't finished." He picked up the box with the ring and twirled it in the light. This belonged to one of the branches, which, as we now find out, hasn't dried up at all. From his tone, Sophia understood that he was talking about the missing heiress. The key in his pocket seemed to flutter. "Sorry, Signor Wallace, my shoulder is upset. There's blood." She showed her sleeve. The lawyer nodded, handed her a snow-white handkerchief with an embroidered "Wash," and added dryly, "The first aid kit on the music floor has everything you need," and a pause. "Don't touch the family's personal belongings. They like their secrets to stay locked away." He focused on the second word, glancing straight into her pocket. Sophia felt her cheekbone clench. But instead of answering, she nodded and left, clutching the base of the brass key with her palm, as if afraid he would speak. The staircase leading up there was narrow and spiral, hidden between 2 frescoes. As Sophia climbed, the walls echoed dully with her footsteps, as if the villa were singing a bass scale. The musician's floor, according to the plan, contained guest apartments, where opera singers and conductors used to stay, while the Italian cavatina flowed below. Here, in the attics, they rehearsed scherzos. The first aid kit hung in the hallway under the bust of Rossini. Sophia washed her finger with hydrogen peroxide and wrapped it in a thin bandage. The bleeding stopped, but her temples were still pounding. Suddenly, the soft clatter of a harpsichord came from above. A dry, fragile sound, as if someone were playing an arpeggio with one finger. A soft beam of emergency light fell through the door of the score room. Sophia opened the door a crack. The harpsichord stood by the window. The lid was open, but no one was playing. The strings responded to the draft, and music was born from emptiness. On the music stand was a thick blue leather folder with the monogram, L. Reginald Francis Lancaster. The late patriarch. Sophia habitually wiped her palm on her apron and touched the folder. The paper inside crackled as if it were about to speak. The first page is a clipping from the London Times in 1999. Police hunt for baby kidnapped from maternity hospital. A blurry photo of a woman in a surgical mask. The caption, "Suspect may have had coordinates for tracking philanthropist's family." The next page is the family's internal correspondence, addresses, codes, reward amounts. And the last is a list of personal identification items of the kidnapped girl, a lock of hair, a photo in a red coat, and slam, a ring. Sophia slammed the folder shut. Her throat tightened. The kidnapper's name began with 4CG. Her adoptive mother's initial and surname were Sonia Green Delma. This is nonsense, thought Sophia. It's just a coincidence of names. But a voice in her head whispered, a coincidence, like everything else. Sophia walked down as if she was being pushed, so eager was she to return to the floor where Marco was. From somewhere under the vault came a measured knocking, ch-chuck, ch-chuck, like a hammer in a forge. The girl turned toward the greenhouse. There, Marco deftly trimmed the dried shoots of the pomegranate, throwing the branches into a basket. The light of the kerosene lamps softly illuminated the bones of his hands, and the roar of the storm died down in this jungle silence. "A new storm?" he asked without turning around. "It seems like the storm is inside, not outside," Sophia exhaled. He straightened up, turned around, peering into her face. "You have the eyes of a man who opened Pandora's box." Sophia didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "I found one folder and—" "My adoptive mother's name is next to the word abduction." Marco slowly took off his gloves. "Do you want me to call a doctor?" "No, I want you to help me open the archive." He raised an eyebrow. "The photo library, there's centuries of dust there. And more rats than roses. I have the key." Marco glanced around. The kitchen was still bustling around, with servants carrying trays. The manager was busy setting the table. But in the far corner, where the subtropical ferns touched the ceiling, no one would hear them. "Okay." He pulled a bunch of flashlights from his pocket. "But we need to do this before dawn. At 3:30 the guards change. The cameras are rebooted. We'll have 20 minutes. 2 o'clock in the morning." The corridor leading to the bell tower was damp. Sophia took off her gloves. Her fingers were sweaty. The brass key touched the rusty crack. A grinding sound. The door did not give in. "Give it to me." Marco took the key, pressed it sharply, and the lock clicked, as if yielding to the force of his hand. The room was the size of a classroom in a provincial school. Shelves to the ceiling. Films, plastic reels, photo containers, boxes where the old glue had dissolved into dust. Marco put the flashlight on a tripod. The light fell heavy yellow on the family chronicle. In the center is a Bell & Howell projector. Next to it is a screen made of woven canvas. Sophia was afraid to touch it, sensing that the films would be as fragile as wax wings. But Marco, as if he knew the order, pulled out a reel with a white label. "Rose Garden, May 1999. "This is the one," he said. He fed the tape into the teeth of the feed mechanism. The projector hummed, the lamp flickered white. A sunny garden flashed on the screen. Roses, a gravel path, a fountain girl. A girl in a red coat chases a dove. Thin hands flapped in the air, lips moved, but there was no sound. "Stop," Sophia whispered. Marco rewinded, freezing the frame. The girl's face took up half the screen. Eyelashes cast shadows, a comma-shaped mole under her wrist. Sophia placed her right hand next to the canvas. The mole matched exactly. It was as if her brain had fallen into an icy well. The skin lost its temperature, the sound of blood became muffled. "It's you," Marco said calmly, but his voice trembled. "So the legend is not a myth." "What legend?" She barely moved. "That the Lancaster child was taken away at night in a storm, and it will return when the villa loses power. Consider that there is no electricity, the storm has come, and you are here." Sophia sat down on an old chair. The paint was cracked. Everything around her resembled a dream, but the pain in her bandaged finger convinced her. This is reality. She looked up. "My childhood was an orphanage, cheap turnstiles in the park, perfume from a market window. I had no idea what Lancaster was." "How could my foster mother?" Marco was silent for a moment. Then he took a small flash drive out of his pocket. 10 years ago, a friend of mine hacked the county police archive. He found a kidnapping case. I kept this copy for the cover story." He held out the flash drive. "If you want to know what the investigation was like, it's all here." "Why did you keep this?" "I grew up among gardens, but I was fed rumors. Gardens are stories. I wanted to know the truth." Sophia closed her fingers on the plastic of the flash drive. The metal sparkled in the light of the flashlight. Footsteps. A soft thud came from the corridor. 2, perhaps 3, walking, talking in hushed tones. Sophia flinched. "Security," Marco breathed out. "They're checking the locked wings on schedule." He switched off the projector. The lamp went out, but its posthumous warmth still made friends with the air. They fell silent. The footsteps approached, passed by. The door of the archive, fortunately, looked like an old closet. The guards ignored it. Through the crack, Sophia saw the red glow of the lanterns, then darkness. Marco exhaled slowly. 20 minutes flew by. Returning to the greenhouse, they found a white envelope with a wax seal on a bench. Inside was a check for 500,000 euros and a sticky note. "We appreciate your dedication to cleanliness, Ms. Green. But some stains are best left unseen." R.W. Sophia touched the numbers with her fingers. 500,000, a sum that could be exchanged for silence, and forget the villa, the filming, the cemetery, the line of coincidences. Marco grimaced. "It's enough to buy an ocean, but not a conscience." Sophia looked up. "Conscience doesn't go to the pawn shop." She tore the check in half, fearlessly. And at that very moment, a bright light flooded the gallery. The power had returned. The systems resumed power. The cameras came to life. Somewhere servos began to squeal. A security monitor on the wall lit up, silhouettes of people in a forbidden zone. "We've been spotted." Marco grabbed Sophia's hand and pulled her toward the exit. "The bell tower is closer. There's a blind spot there." A stone passage along the bell tower led out to the cliff. Torn clouds let in the dim light of the moon. The rain had died down, but the air was bristling with salt. The sea roared below, as if hoping to be captured on film that no one was filming. "The cameras can't get through here." Marco let go of Sophia's hand. "What next?" Sophia pulled out the key. "Sulm. We need a door that he can open." In the list of personal belongings, it said, "A ring for identification, a key for hope." So the well of hope is somewhere nearby. Under the bell tower, Marco nodded toward the dilapidated span. "There's an old crypt there, now blocked. They say a secret was buried inside 20 years ago." Sophia understood that her chances were minimal. The guards had already raised the alarm. But at that moment, a siren flared up along the entire perimeter of the villa, and the floodlights went out. A second power failure? No, someone had turned off the switch. The path to the crypt was dark but empty. The stone portal was sealed with a grate, a padlock, rusted since the middle of the century. Sophia inserted the key. A short clang. The lock fell. The door opened, releasing the stale air of candle wax. "It's time," Marco said almost in a whisper. "I'm with you." Inside the crypt there was a smell of wax and an old book. The steps phosphorescent in the semi-darkness. Someone had once installed luminescent tiles. On the pedestal was a tomb without inscriptions and a small carved chest. Sophia removed the lid with trembling fingers. Inside was a pack of letters, a child's pendant in the shape of a harp, a silk mitten, and Sonia Green's passport, issued in the same year as the abduction. On the blank page was an entry stamp, Switzerland. Sophia leaned her back against the cold stand. Everything inside her had collapsed. Years of fake walls of newspapers made of lies. The only woman she had ever known was her mother, still holding a thread from the stolen cradle. "It's your truth," Marco said quietly, "and you pulled it out." Sophia gave a short sob, but instead of tears she exhaled. "Now I know where to go." "Lausanne, Saint-Savin, then." "I'll go." Marco carefully covered her palm. "But first we need to survive until the morning." Footsteps pounded outside and the door of an electric car slammed. Wallace, he had the keys to all the gates. "It's time to go." Marco glanced at the tiny window of the crypt, where the pre-dawn glow was beginning to appear. The sky was becoming pale with fire. By morning the villa smelled of coffee and ozone, as if sin had been washed away by a storm. Security was left without explanation, a temporary outage, a malfunction of the old generator. Wallace walked the corridors like a tenor after a torn aria, and Sophia was nowhere to be found. Because Sophia and Marco were already leaving the territory through the back gate. In the trunk of the Fiat was a box of crypto, a roll of film, a flash drive, a key, a mitten, a torn receipt. A couple of pieces of paper, fake passes that they had found in the accountant's office. Ahead was a road that knew neither navigators nor guarantees. As the car disappeared around the corner, the villa seemed to sigh with relief. The cameras looked empty again. The storm had passed. But the girl's portrait looked at the far end of the gallery differently. A handprint remained on the glass, smearing the perfect gloss. Someone had forgotten to wipe it. And let the new shifts find and erase this trace. Traces can always be erased, but history is already moving along new rails. Only the tiny flame of a kerosene lamp, forgotten in the archives, continued to burn, like the heart valve of the Lancaster villa. There, in the pulse of light, someone left a letter on the table. "The baby has been found." Now she'll have to learn to walk on the edge of a cliff without falling, but she has wings made of truth. RFL. There were no captions. But Sophia felt its meaning even as the car sped through the fog toward the highway that led along the sea, where the sun had not yet been born, but was already low, somewhere beyond the horizon. The night was over, but the light of the kerosene lamp still sang in her memory, proof that darkness was temporary if you had a fire inside. 30,200 characters. Seozo 347. The SR-1 wound along the Italian Riviera like a silver thread on the black velvet of the sea. The 2008 Fiat Panda clung to the wet asphalt like a toy. The headlights picked out the signs for Genoa, but Marco was heading northwest, toward the French border. The sooner they left the province, the longer the arms of Wallace's lawyer would become. Sophia sat quietly in the passenger seat, clutching the crypt box to her chest. Inside were letters, a pendant, a flash drive with a police file. Each item was destined to tell a story, but for now, each felt like a time bomb. The air in the cabin smelled of damp leather from old seats and the salt they had brought with them from the cliff. Marco turned on the heater. The glass immediately fogged up, but the first rays of dawn were still visible through the web of condensation. "Can you sleep?" he asked. Sophia shook her head. "I can hear the film in my ears." "And the girl, I can still see her coat." Marco nodded, shifting into fifth gear. The engine rumbled. "We'll cross the border near Menton, then straight to Nice, Cannes, Antibes," he said. "We'll be in Saint Raphael by 7 in the morning, and we'll stop there. You need to catch your breath." Sophia took a deep breath. "You planned everything." "I'm the villa's gardener," Marco chuckled. "My job is roots." Roots, shoots, and escape routes. Sophia nodded, but inside a question was brewing that cut deeper than her cut finger. "Why are you taking risks with me?" He fell silent. The windshield wipers swept the glass as if they were choosing their words along with him. For the first time in 27 years the castle came alive. For the first time a legend became a face. He glanced quickly at her. "And because if there is truth, it must be heard, no matter who dislikes it." Sophia looked away to the horizon, where the first pearlescent rays were pulling the darkness back into oblivion. Marco's voice was as firm as a certificate of authenticity. Error 712. The roadside café Cap Azur dozed like a seagull with its head under its wing. The sign Ouvert glowed a faint neon pink. Inside, the aroma of espresso and yesterday's bun. Marco ordered 2 double coffees and almond croissants. It was not yet 7 o'clock in the morning, and Sophia's knees were already shaking from lack of sleep. She didn't take off her jacket. Every fold of her apron reminded them that they were running, not traveling. On the table lay a flash drive and one of the letters. The envelope had turned yellow. On the back was sealing wax with a lily coat of arms, torn. "Shall we open it?" Marco nodded at the message. Sophia glanced around the empty room. The barista was watching TV. The long-haul truck driver was sleeping with his face in his hands. She took out the letter. Lausanne, 3rd of March 2000. "My dear father, I can't come back until you accept my choice. But you were right. The heart aches without a home. I secretly moved Sophia to Switzerland. No one is looking for us here. She is growing. She has your look. If one day you understand that blood is stronger than insults, send a sign to the address of the main staircase. I will see everything. I believe that the villa will recognize her, even if you and I forget the words. Yours, Letizia." "Letitia," Sophia whispered. "My mother?" Marco raised his eyebrows in surprise. "In the Lancaster family tree, there is only one daughter named Elle. She disappeared in 1998 after a scandal involving an unequal marriage." Sophia tried to digest what she had heard. So S.G., her adoptive mother, could have been either a savior or a kidnapper to whom Letizia had entrusted the child. But the letter spoke of a voluntary escape. She felt the heart pendant. On the back was an engraving. La Scala dei Speci, 12. The mirror staircase, 12. A reminder of the hiding place. The waiter brought the coffee. Sophia brought the cup, and a scalding sip brought the blood back into her veins. 2 Juin 2028. They turned off the highway into the total car park near Fréjus. Marco opened the trunk, checking that the contents had not been crushed. Suddenly, Sophia noticed a grey Range Rover in the rearview mirror, Monaco number squares, tinted windows. The car was slowly driving around the perimeter, as if looking for someone. "We are not alone," she whispered. Marco gave an unnecessary glance, like a gardener at a pest of aphids. Professionally fast. "Could be Wallace's people. He has access to Monte Carlo." "What to do?" "The gas tank is a quarter empty." "We'll go through grass, mountain serpentines. The GPS signal is jumping. but we need to get rid of the panda. It's too noticeable." Sophia nodded, feeling her heart pick up speed again. Their empty dream was about to run away. While Marco was paying for the gas, the girl took out her phone. The network showed 3 missed calls. 2 from the cleaning agency dispatcher, 1 unknown. Voicemail. A message from the dispatcher. "Sophia, where are you?" "Villa security claims you left early. Contact them." Long press delete. The phone felt heavy in her hand, as if reproaching her. The road to the city of perfumers is a continuous loop over limestone slopes. The windows of the panda are wide open. The scent of pine, tangerine, the damp stone of the basement walls. Sophia pressed herself against the glass, driving away sleep, but the landscape was beginning to melt. "Just wait another 20 minutes, said Marco. "I know a farmer here. He keeps old cars. We'll take a Citroen 2CV, and no one will recognize us." Sophia smiled. From a luxurious villa to a utilitarian iron, a worthy plot twist. Farmer Roger, a stooped man with a wind-scorched face, met them without asking any questions. Marco often took cuttings from him for the greenhouse. The Citroen was parked under the awning, pot-bellied, the color of thick pistachio mousse. There was half a tank of gasoline. The documents were in the glove compartment. Marco thrust an envelope with a bank card at Roger. He nodded, noticing the bandage on Sophia's hand. "Cleanse your soul. Perfume is made from flower waste." 20 minutes later, they were driving through the narrow streets of grass towards the eastern exit. The Range Rover was gone, but the fear remained. Outside the city, the road wound between trimmed cypresses. Sophia, twirling her harp pendant, suddenly realized La Scala dei Specchi is not a poetic image, but an exact address. In Lausanne, there is a 19th century house that is named after the mirror mosaic on the staircase walls. The number 12 matches the engraving. She opened the map on her phone. Yes, the street exists. "Lausanne is 4 hours, Marco nodded approvingly. "We'll be there in the evening. We need to prepare. Lausanne has strict cantonal control, cameras at every intersection." Marco chuckled. "I'm glad that cleaning specialists now know the stages of Swiss video surveillance." Sophia smiled tiredly. "Life teaches you to clean up the traces of laundering." By midday, the sun had burned through the clouds and the asphalt was starting to feel hot. Marco was driving the Citroen along the mountain serpentines. The speed was a maximum of 70, but the steep hairpins took away attention. A familiar silhouette flashed in the rearview mirror. The gray Range Rover was back. The car accelerated on the forest horseshoe, closing the distance. The Citroen coughed its carburetor. Marco jerked off the speed and turned onto a dirt road. Stones flew from under the wheels. The road led down to an abandoned farm. "Let's jump!" Marco shouted, braking. The car was still crawling when they jumped out, hiding behind a stone fence. The Range Rover descended more slowly, its searchlights combing the bushes. Sophia held her breath. 2 shadows emerged, one stocky, the other tall and bespectacled. "Wallace?" "No, security guards." One was on the phone. "Yes, sir, they've abandoned the other car. We're looking." The voice was alarmed. Marco pressed Sophia's hand, pointing up. An old irrigation pipe ran above the farm. They crawled along the wall, up an overgrown ladder, over the pipe, and found themselves on a forest path leading back to the highway. "Then on foot," Marco exhaled. "There's a route to Les Escales station. From there a train to Geneva." They walked 5 kilometers in silence. The forest smelled of damp pine needles. Their boots sank into the moss. By 2:40 p.m., they reached the platform, an abandoned ticket booth and a couple of villagers waiting for a freight train. The train to Geneva was arriving in 40 minutes. The third-class passenger carriage was emptying. Only a woman with a child at the window, an old man with a newspaper, and a student with a laptop. Sophia settled down by the vestibule, putting a box on her knees. Marco stood, leaning against the window. The train moved off, rocking like a boat. Sophia pulled out the flash drive and inserted it into her phone via an adapter. On the screen were scanned reports. Operation Aurora. Kidnapping of newborn Sophia L. Suspect: Sonia Green, nurse at the Santa Maria Clinic. Motive: monetary demand. Later, a note in red pen. Blood fragments and tissue in the suspect's car matched the child's mother, but no ransom demand was received. Suspect disappeared, child not found. Sophia slid her finger down. In 2001, the case was closed due to lack of evidence of life or death. She didn't demand ransom, Sophia whispered. That means she didn't kidnap me for money. Maybe she did, Marco suggested, if Letitia asked. But why didn't you tell the truth when I grew up? Marco had no answer. The train sped through the tunnel, lights flickering like forgotten pages. 17:15. The Lausanne platform greeted them with a cold wind. Lake Geneva glittered like a steel mirror, not at all like that picture from the postcards, where the Alpine ridge was caressed by azure. Sophia turned up the collar of her jacket. Mirror stairs, Auchi Quarter, Marco said, studying the map. 20 minutes walk. The streets of Lausanne are stairs and ramps. Every step is gymnastics. Sophia felt the blood pounding in her temples, a day without almost any sleep. But with every cell of her body she was drawn to the address, Scala dei Speci 12. The house was reached via a narrow cobblestone street. The front door was solid oak, but the handle was polished as if it hadn't been used in years. On the door frame was a bronze plaque, La Scala dei Specchi, proprietà privata. The SL key trembled in her fingers. Sophia turned it, it clicked. The door gave way, releasing the smell of old whitewash and burnt wood. Marco turned on the phone's flashlight. Hundreds of mirrors shone inside, the walls, the ceiling, the steps. Each glass reflected the other, creating the illusion of an endless corridor. On step number 12 was engraved the same harp as on the pendant. Sophia stood up, put the pendant to the drawing. A magnetic click, the plate shook. A cracking mechanism was heard above, and a box came out of the wall. Inside is a small diary in red leather. On the first page, "If my daughter Sophia reads this, know this. I never left you. We were separated, but the mirror remembers, and I'm still here. Signed, Letitia." Sophia dropped the pendant. Tears welled up for the first time in hours, and she did not fight them back. Marco hugged her without saying a word. The mirrors around him reflected the scene endlessly, as if thousands of Sophias and Marcos were holding each other, multiplying in space. Footsteps came from the upper floor. Someone else was in the house. Sophia looked up. A shadow ran across the mirrors. Marco reacted faster, like a predator. He hid Sophia behind himself. "Madam." The woman's voice trembled, strangely similar to... Sophia came out from behind Marco. A woman with chestnut curls and a reserved posture was coming down the stairs. Her face had wrinkles around her eyes, but her gaze was like the one in the childhood photo in the villa, the same comma-shaped birthmark, only on her left hand. "Mom," Sophia said barely audibly. Letitia stopped on the step. Her fingers pressed the railing. Tears sparkled, reflecting 100 reflections in the walls. "I knew the mirror would bring you back," she whispered. "I knew it every day." Sophia rose, stumbling over her tears, and the world collapsed in an embrace that lasted 27 years. The fire of a bonfire of memory. Marco looked away, giving them space. Letizia whispered in Italian, then in French, repeating endlessly, Mi chérie, ma petite, my girl. There was a fireplace burning in the living room of the house. Marco had lit it with an unsealed bag of dry branches. Letitia had put on the tea, and the scent of jasmine and ginger had crept into the rooms. Sophia sat on the sofa holding her diary, while her mother spoke. My grandfather made me give up love. He wanted to marry me to an Italian count. I loved the artist Gabriel Green. She smiled. He was poor, but his heart painted worlds. We fled to Switzerland. Sophia was born here. But the kidnapping? The daughter whispered. Gabriel died at a construction site, an unofficial part-time job. I was left without money, without citizenship. People came to us, they offered protection, promised to help legalize. I trusted them, and in the morning you were gone. A note. The child is safe. Don't look for it, otherwise you'll lose both of them. I searched for years, and all I found was a rumor. The girl was taken to Italy. Sophia remembered the eyes of Sonia's adoptive mother. Kindness, but behind it, fear. Sonia Green? Why do we have the same last name? A coincidence, Letitia shrugged. Or a sign. I studied the reports, but the kidnapper's name was never mentioned. Sophia pulled the passport out of the box. Letitia frowned. That's not her photo, she said. The passport is fake. That's why they didn't find you. They made new documents. Marco sat down with a cup of coffee in his hands. Wallace runs a whole network. Could he sell a child? Letitia shuddered. Perhaps. But why write threats? Why leave the key pendant? The question hung. The fire crackled. Outside the window the early lights of the city scattered. Lausanne had woken up. At night, when the clock struck Zamco aux Hours, there was a knock at the door. Marco got up first. On the threshold was a DHL courier. In his hands was a thin envelope addressed to Sophia Lancaster. The recipient's signature was required. Marco checked the documents and signed. The courier disappeared. Sophia opened the envelope. Inside was a drone photo of the villa and a note. We both know where the mirror staircase leads. Come back or I'll take the mirrors one by one. How about you do you? Wallace. Marco clenched his fists. Blackmail. Letitia clutched her heart. He knows where I live. Sophia stood up. Her gaze was hard, as if peering over the edge of a cliff. He wants us to be afraid. But the mirror always shows fear to the one holding it. Marco smiled at the corner of his lips. So we're going back? Not as fugitives, Sophia corrected. As heirs, Letitia took the key harp with a trembling hand and handed it to Sophia. Take the house. Make it what it should be. Marco nodded. The gardens will bloom. Let this be the beginning. Lausanne was returning to silence. The streets were emptying. The mirrors on the staircase glowed from the fireplace, like a heart reflected in infinity. Sophia climbed to step 12, looked at herself, Marco, and her mother. The three figures doubled, tripled, multiplied until they resembled a long line of ancestors. She suddenly understood the mirror staircase is not the end, but a bridge. The house of Villa Lancaster still holds her childhood, but here, in Switzerland, maturity begins. Sophia touched the glass. Her reflection smiled, for the first time, no doubt. She turned to Marco and Leticia. In the morning we buy tickets to Genoa, and then home. Home is where you decide to put a period. Leticia took her hand. Marco placed his on top. Then we put a comma, he said. Stories are still being written. The three stood on the steps and the mirrors seemed to whisper, Welcome home. Outside the roar of an aircraft was faintly heard. Another drone was circling the roof. But not a single mirror moved. Only those who had a right to the truth were reflected here, and the stairs led up. 30,100 characters. 05. 11. Dawn over Lake Geneva resembled the other side of a mirror. The silver film of clouds peeled away in layers, as if someone were carefully scraping away mercury to let sunlight into a new reality. Sofia, Letizia, and Marco were sitting in the kitchen of the mirror staircase, finishing their second pot of green tea with jasmine. The night was barely letting up. No one's eyelids were sticking together, but their thoughts were feverishly turning over the plan. Return to the villa, claim the heir's right, tear the mask off Richard Wallace. With a small tape recorder he had bought at the station, Marco recorded short audio notes. Step 1. Get to Genoa. Exchange codes with the gardening team. Check which staff are loyal. Step 2. Legally certify Letizia's letter of kinship. Step 3. Open the main archive, the Patriarch's diaries. Sofia listened to his deep voice bounce off the coffered ceiling and noticed that in this old kitchen, the echo was like the house breathing. A Bourgeois 25. The Lausanne platform was drowning in morning news tabloids, headlines about the Davos negotiations, about the unseasonal thunderstorm in Liguria, but not a word about the heiress of Lancaster. This gave the illusion of time. The Lyria commuter train jerked out of the tunnel, the grinding of wheels resounding in every bone. The trio chose a first-class carriage, fewer witnesses, more silence. Sofia laid out the photocopies of the reports, Letizia's letters, and the harp pendant on the table. Letizia held an old pocket volume of Divina Commedia, a gift from her father, the last vestige of acceptance. Marco studied the villa's electrical circuit diagrams, downloaded from the municipality's website, and used pencil to supplement them with the real circuits that only the staff knew. The train picked up speed, vineyards, industrial areas, tunnels. Sofia tried to focus on the words of the report, but she was much more occupied by the diary she had found behind the wall. It was written in sepia ink, the pages smelled of incense. Each of her grandfather's notes was like a touch from another era. Today, Sofia touched a rose petal for the first time. I hid our light so that no one would extinguish it. An entry from August 12, 2000. The man in glasses said the child has disappeared. My heart has been turned off. The lines were smudged. The ink had gotten caught in the rain or the author's tears. Find at any cost. Return any name. The handwriting trembled like a tuning fork before it cracks. Are you okay? Letitia asked, touching her daughter's hand. I see his pain, and I see that he understood what it would be like for me in a world where every wall has a price, Sofia answered quietly. Marco looked up. And now we're a tuning fork. Retuning the house. 13s. The port of Genoa smelled of fuel oil, seaweed, and pizza al taglio. The pier was teeming, tourists, sailors, students. It was easier to blend in with such a crowd. Letizia kept closer to the middle of the stream. The fear of many years was hidden in the tension of her shoulders, but her eyes looked determined, as if each step returned the earth beneath her feet. Marco called the gardener Giuliano on a closed channel, the same one who grew tea roses for the mistress. Would the house know about the arrival of the heiress? The answer came quickly. 4 people out of 12 are loyal, the rest are under Wallace's control. The power grid can be knocked down through Phase B during the daytime reception. So we'll get the diaries during the day, Marco commented. While the guests are in the winter garden, we'll go down to the library where the safe is. Sofia nodded. Can we distract Wallace? Letitia smiled. At worst, there will be a press conference. He loves cameras, and so do I. 3 hours at the port were spent buying new phones, SIM cards, and inexpensive suits. Sofia, a dark blue cleaning service suit, Letizia, an elegant grey coat and felt hat. Marco, an inconspicuous electrical technician suit. Uniforms are the best masquerade, Marco winked. People don't look for truth in those who carry boxes. 1837. A black Mercedes shuttle stopped at the service entrance. A young security guard in a booth checked the documents. Passes with the stamp Clean Star, an order for deep cleaning after storm. The signature was the abbreviation RW. The writer himself must have liked this irony. The gate creaked open, the way opened. The blue-gray sky hung low. The second storm was approaching the coast. Sophia, sitting in the shuttle's luggage compartment between boxes of rags and vacuum cleaners, peered at the silhouette of the villa, like a huge black bird spreading its wings over the cliff. Entrance through the laundry room. Every cleaning professional knew, the cameras there are blind, the humidity is a hindrance. Letitia stayed in the micro-living room for the staff. According to the plan, she will appear later, at the very noise of the reception. Sophia and Marco headed to the basement. You can get to the library bypassing the sensors through the old elevator if you turn off Phase B. The basement was cold and smelled of fuel oil from the old generator. Marco opened the distribution cabinet. Inside was dust, arabesques of wires. He pointed to a narrow screw switch. B. Sophia held the flashlight. Click. The light flickered, but did not go out. The villa was fed by 2 lines. "Give it a few minutes and security will think it's another glitch," Marco said. "The backup power system isn't turning on the video network in the archive wing." Sophia took a deep breath. Memory caught the smells. Kerosene, polish, rain. It was as if the night was repeating itself, only the roles were reversed. Now the darkness was helping. 1912. The library lock was protected by the code pin 1914, the year the villa was founded. Marco touched the keys, and the door swung open. Inside there was a smell of old leather, dusty paper shavings, and a faint hint of incense. The main safe is a 4-meter-tall stainless steel monster, the door with the villa's coat of arms. The code is a 6-digit combination. Sophia held her grandfather's diary. In the margins, a note in Latin numerals, abim sex nant, v I dunti. A Roman riddle, 4 to 10 95 1 2. She entered 041 Dorosan and saw Fevafo Anatso. The first lock clicked. The second level is biometrics, Lancaster's palm print. Sophia put her hand to it. Suddenly a signal rang. A second. The lock accepted. Marco exhaled. "You are the blood of the family," he whispered. The door opened. On the shelves were volumes, notebooks, envelopes, audio cassettes. Letitia was still on the line. A text message vibrated in Sophia's pocket. "There are 70 guests in the lobby. Wallace is speaking for 20 minutes. "We're working," Marco sighed. The dust lay in a 0.5 mm layer. Every step raised a mist. Sophia reached for a row of red volumes. Diary 85, 99. Marco, boxes of films. They filled the bag, cutting off the air in the storage room. Sophia suddenly saw a thin tetrablock in a velvet quiver. Letitia L. She opened it. The first pages were watercolors. Children's feet running through a garden, the roof of a villa, the profile of a young man signed Gabriel. The last page. Sophia G. Wait for me in the mirrors. I'll come back for you. Tears welled up in a second. Sophia wiped them away with her sleeve. 5 minutes left, Marco said quietly. The cameras will be up soon. They had packed the last box of audio cassettes when a radio crackled in the corridor behind the wall. Security was reporting a malfunction. It's time. Marco closed the safe, turning the dial. Your fingerprint was the key, but Wallace is smart enough too. We have to go. Even before they reached the library's threshold, the alarm blared. The light path blinked red. Marco grabbed his bag. Sophia clutched the journals to her chest. They ran for the elevator shaft. "Plan B?" she asked. "The mirror gallery," Marco replied. "The tunnel under the garden leads to the sea grottos." The siren was gaining tone, a guttural howl of "ooh ooh ooh." Behind them, the stomping of boots. Sophia saved her breath so as not to break into a squeal. The corridor threw them into the winter garden. The damp greenery of the conifers glistened with greenhouse fog. In the center stood Wallace like a maestro under the dome of the greenhouse, yelling, "Stop them! They are stealing the family's property!" Letizia appeared on the other side holding a tablet. She turned on the live broadcast. On the screen there was a Twitter feed with the hashtag #JerderLancasterAir. "It's too late, Richard," she said loudly. "The heiress of the house has been found and the world is already watching." The flashlight from the press's lights blinded the guards, who froze. Wallace was lost for a second. It was enough. Marco and Sophia jumped into the side passage leading to the mirror gallery. The mirrors reflected their run 1,000 times. Waves, lights, the blood of the pulse. At the exit to the garden, the bag got caught. One box fell. The tape spilled out. The film hung down like a black snake. Sophia stopped to pick it up, but Marco shouted, "We need them alive, not in an archive. Run!" They broke away as quickly as possible and went outside. The storm was returning, the wind was roaring, drops were hitting their faces. The path to the grotto is a climb along the cliff on iron brackets, with the sea thundering low below. Sophia, squinting from the wind, stepped first. Her palms slid along the wet metal. In front of her is Marco with a bag. Someone shouted from behind. There were pursuits. The grotto is a dark corridor. The bottom is slippery. The wind does not reach there, only the splash of water under the arches. Sophia swayed. Marco turned on the phone's flashlight. The walls are rainbow-colored with salt and lime. "There's a boat further on," he whispered. "An old lifeboat. At the entrance is the skipper's box." Marco pulled out the key, the same one the gardener gave him at night. He started the engine, sneezed, hummed. The boat came out into the black water. The storm behind flashed like paparazzi. "We've got the main thing," said Marco. "The diaries will really explain everything in court." Sophia sat clutching her mother's diary as the waves slapped the sides. "Are you sure the bureaucratic world listens to the truth?" "We will find those who will hear," he promised. A dictaphone fell out of Sophia's pocket. She pressed Rec. The History of the House of Lancaster. Chapter 1. The Girl and the Portrait. The recording hissed, but the words formed a narrative that finally belonged to the one who lived in it. The next morning they reached the small port of Levanto, abandoned the boat among the fishing boats. The Trenitalia train took them to Naples, a city where Marco, it turned out, had journalist friends. In a cramped attic above an antique shop, they opened the diaries. Each entry by Richard was an admission of power and guilt. April 14th, 2000. I've entrusted the search to Wallace. If he finds the granddaughter, he'll get a percentage, but he's looking for money, not people. May 23rd, 2000. Wallace said, "The girl is dead. I don't believe it." December 31st, 2003. Today I dreamed of Sophia in a red coat laughing. Maybe she's alive. If she's found, the house is hers. Sophia closed the book. He loved me, even without knowing where I was. Letizia silently smoked an old French cigarette on the balcony, looking at Vesuvius, covered in haze. "The Lancastrians are still powerful, but truth has longer roots," she said. Marco laid out the newspapers on the table. The headlines were already thundering. "Sensation, missing heiress reappears." Scandal. Lawyer guardian involved in kidnapping? The Neapolitan sun burned out the shadows. 2 days later, Sofia and Letizia were sitting in the Genoa prosecutor's office. Lawyers from 3 countries were requesting documents. Diaries, tapes, letters, everything they took away turned into evidence. Wallace was called in. He arrived surrounded by lawyers and press photographers. His hair was gray at the temples, his laugh cocky, but when the prosecutor laid out the diaries, his eyes narrowed. "It's a fake," he said. Letizia submitted Sofia's passport card. The DNA test was already being prepared in the lab. The prosecutor reported an Interpol request to the Swiss archives. Wallace looked like he'd lost his baton. Marco stood next to Sofia, as strong as a pillar. "Justice does not always bargain," he whispered. "But those who are afraid of her trade," answered Sofia. That evening at the Il Convento Hotel, an envelope with no return address was placed on the table under the door. Sofia opened it. Inside was a photograph of Sonia Green driving a grey Peugeot. The date was September 2001 with Swiss plates. The inscription read, "She saved you because I paid her debts." "Take care of the truth." The signature was the initials FS. "Who is FS?" Letitia asked. Marco thought there was an account in the archives in the name of Fabio Sartori, the former account manager of the Patriarch. Sofia suddenly felt the pieces of the puzzle coming together. Someone in the house had been playing both sides all these years, preserving the chances of the family and the soul. In the morning, the headline of the Corriere della Sera was full of the words, "Echo of the Cliff. Sofia Lancaster returns home." The photo was of Sofia holding a diary with Letizia and Marco behind her. The prosecutor's office commented, "The kidnapping investigation has been reopened." "Are you ready for war?" Marco asked, rolling up his sleeves. "I'm ready for history," Sofia replied. "Let those who fear its end wage war." At the bottom of the front page, a small note. "To be continued." Sofia smiled. For the first time in her life, history belonged to her. Now no lawyer would wipe the dust off the diaries. Outside, Naples was noisy. Shop windows reflected the sun's blades, and on the horizon Vesuvius roared. The volcano knew that sometimes silence is louder than thunder. "We will return to the villa," said Sofia, "not as ghosts, but as masters. And we will open its doors to all who seek music in stone." Marco offered his hand. Letitia covered her tears with her palm. Warm, alive. History has turned a new page, and the dust of the diaries has risen to settle not on paper, but in the hearts of those who will read it tomorrow. 30,200 characters. 0703. Naples was waking up in a pink haze, smelling of espresso and melted cheese on focaccia. In a narrow attic above an antique shop, Sofia, Letizia, and Marco were sitting at a round table covered with newspapers, notebooks, and photocopied diaries. Yesterday's Corriere della Sera was already out of date. New headlines trumpeted the affair of the century. Lawyer Richard Wallace was giving his comments to CNN. "This is a clever scam perpetrated by a group of adventurers." But the louder he spoke, the more people wondered who the adventurer really was. Sofia tried to write down her plan for the day in her notebook, but the lines blurred. Her body demanded sleep, her brain demanded movement. Marco noticed her fatigue and poured coffee from an old copper Turk. "One more day and we will turn the board over," he said quietly. "He's already turned the board over," Sofia smiled tiredly. "We're picking up the pieces." At that moment, footsteps creaked on the stairs. The owner of the antique shop, Signor Pini, stood up and placed a long wooden box on the table. On the lid was the signature of a 17th century master and an engraved R.W. Inside was an antique chess set made of black onyx and ivory. "The courier said it was for you, Signora Green," Peony explained. "With the signature," he twirled the card, "from someone who appreciates a good game." Sophia exchanged a glance with Marco. Letitia tensed. On the side of the box was a small phrase in Latin, ludus in vita, vita in ludo. The game of life, the life of the game. Under the figure of the white horse lay a thin black USB key. On it was a sticker with the number 5. Sophia inserted the flash drive into the laptop. One file, video. They turned the sound down to minimum. On the screen, an office, windows into nighttime London. Wallace at the table, a bookshelf behind him. "Miss Lancaster, I admire your persistence, but every game ends with a handshake. Your stake is feelings, mine is numbers. I offer 10 million euros. The condition is the immediate withdrawal of all claims, the renunciation of names, and a public statement that the documents are forged. Silence is the key to peace for you and your friends." The video ends. A timer appears at the bottom. 48. Ma'am. A counter until the conditional deadline. He wants to buy silence. Letitia clenched her fists. And if he doesn't buy it, what? Sophia sighed. Marco stood up and took the black queen out of the box. Under the base was a microphone. "Eavesdropping, probably a GPS tag too. We'll get the battery. The counter will start sounding the alarm. Let's play better." Marco grinned, took out a knife, and immediately cut off the power. "Let him hear the silence." Sophia closed the lid. "Okay, we won't evade the answer, but we will give it publicly." Te taču. PM. The Romeo Hotel conference room has become an arena. Reporters, cameras, live broadcasts. Sophia, dressed in a simple black suit, steps up to the microphones. Letizia and Marco are behind her. In front of her is a box and a USB key. "Good afternoon. I am Sophia Lancaster. Here in Naples I received a gift of chess and a video ultimatum from Mr. Wallace. He offers money to give up his own name. I thank him for the excellent set, but remind him the game ends in check, not in bills." She opened the box. "The figures are empty. The microphone has been found. The battery has been removed. We are returning this gift as evidence, and the real gift is the truth. My grandfather's diaries, the documents of financial fraud that incriminate Mr. Zoetzer Wallace have already been given to the prosecutor and investigative journalists. Copies are in good hands. If anything happens to me or my family, they will become public." Flashbulbs blinded the room. Questions rained down like peas on glass. Sophia answered only one. "What will you do next?" "I will return Lancaster House to the people. I will open the doors to everyone who has been kept outside for decades." The broadcast had reached 1 million views in half an hour. The timer on the video ultimatum was still ticking, but now the online world knew about it too. 1740, Hotel, Room 504. On the desk is a folder sent by the prosecutor, a preliminary audit report. Wallace has spent the last 10 years siphoning money from the Lancaster charity to offshore accounts, using opaque art purchases as a cover. Some of the money went to private security services, the same ones that were chasing Sophia. It was crossed out by numbers. Marco leafed through the tables, each time under the guise of restoration, and the portrait of the girl is just a safety legend. "He built a maze," Letitia said. "But he forgot that every maze has a monster in the center, and the monster is his own greed." 22:15. Silent shadows moved along the hotel corridor. 2 men in delivery service caps. They were heading for the elevator. In their hands, a black suitcase. The security cameras on the floor suddenly went dark. Marco, who worked as a gardener at night, heard people stepping on the marble. He went out into the hallway with a tray. He was playing the role of a waiter. He noticed men trying to open the slot of the electronic 504 lock with a card scanner. "Would you like to know?" he asked politely. The men turned around. One pushed Marco away with his shoulder, the other pulled out a stun gun. Their hoarse accents gave them away. Eastern European. Marco kept his cool. He hit the first man in the side with his knee and the second man in the elbow with his palm. The suitcase fell, the lid opened slightly. Inside was a yellow cylinder, probably a gas bomb. The alarm went off instantly. Security came running to the floor. The men started running. Marco stepped on the suitcase, slammed the lid with his boot, and squeezed the handle. "Take the bomb for examination," he shouted to the guard. "And the police!" While the handcuffs were clicking on the wrists of the unknown, Sophia and Letitia went out into the corridor. The smell of ammonia hit their noses, meaning the gas was a sleeping gas, not a combat one. Gift, numbers 2-2. Checkmate failed. Oz 4430. The police were interrogating the detainees. The customer's name was not given, but a number with a Monaco code was found in the phone. Journalists were already building theories. Sophia gave a short comment. "Who sent sleeping gas to a woman whom he himself called a fraud?" By 07 Orleans, prosecutors had signed an arrest warrant for Richard Wallace. He was flying a private jet from Nice when he was intercepted by the French gendarmerie. In his pocket were 2 passports, one in the name of Richard White. On board was a suitcase containing 12 million euros in cash. The news feeds flashed. Wallace arrested. The timer on the video ultimatum reset itself. The server was offline. Noon the following day, Sophia returned to Villa Lancaster under the protection of the Carabinieri. The gate opened without hysteria. Did the house know that the new key was her? The old porter stood in the hall. He bowed, whispered, "Benvenuta a casa." He accompanied her to the main staircase. There was a portrait of a girl in a red coat hanging on the platform, but now there is another photo under glass, an adult Sophia, taken by a journalist at a press conference. Next to it is a brass plaque, 1999-2025. Part of a continuous line. Sophia touched the cold glass and smiled. Marco stood next to her. The wind whistled outside. "The house is listening," he said. "Your name is music." In the library, among the shelves, the Carabiniere handed Sophia an envelope found in Wallace's safe, sealed a year ago. On it were only the initials RFL, the office stamp. To be opened on Sophia's return. She opened it. Inside was music paper, a 3-fold copy of the will, and a small note. "Dear granddaughter, if you have this sheet, it means you have found a way through the labyrinth of numbers and masks. The house is your instrument. Play the music on it that I could not play. Your grandfather Richard." Sophia closed her eyes. A quiet melody began to play in her ears, a lullaby that Sonia Green sang. She heard it again, not a film or a dream, but a living memory. A week later, the villa opened to the public. In the evening, a grand piano was placed on the terrace and paper lanterns were placed around it. Journalists, neighbors, former employees, and artists arrived. Sophia went to the microphone. "Good day to all. Write in the comments what city or country you are watching from now, and support the video with a like and a subscription. This story has changed our understanding of people." Laughter, live applause. Marco lit the first lantern. It rose into the sky, trembling like a note. Then hundreds of fireflies flew up over the cliff. The piano music flowed, and it seemed as if the villa was singing together. Sophia ended the evening with the words, "If you like this story, support us with a like, subscribe to the channel, and write what touched you the most. Lancaster House is open." A foundation founded with Wallace's confiscated assets launched a scholarship program for child abduction survivors. Letitia reclaimed her painting studio in Lausanne, but she greeted the dawn every morning on the terrace. Sophia understood the lawyer's gifts were enough. Now it was her turn, and she no longer played with other people's pieces. Only her own remained on the board. The house whispered through the stone, "Checkmate cancelled." The game begins anew. The wind carried the fanfares of the sea, and all the lanterns in the sky, joining together, drew a map. In it, each flame was a story that no one could hide under a chess piece or under the lid of a box. The lawyer's gift turned out to be the final nail in the coffin of his own party, and for Sophia, it was just a candle that lit hundreds of others. The story continued, 9:17 p.m. The festive lights on the villa's terrace were still alight after the opening ceremony. The last guests were lazily sipping limoncello, admiring the hundreds of paper lanterns floating into the dark sky. Sophia paused at the parapet. The sea below was breathing evenly, like a huge chest. Inside the villa, on the contrary, there was a bustle of activity. The staff were collecting glasses. Groups of student volunteers were rolling up the projection screens. She heard their footsteps, voices, laughter, and each sound seemed like a note confirming, yes, the house is alive. It is no longer a museum, but an organism. But as grandfather's diaries warned, an organism that had survived a long coma could react with convulsions. A second storm was gathering from the west. The barometer was falling. And somewhere between the walls there were corridors to which the light had not yet returned. Marco went down to the terrace, shaking the dust off his hands. The last roses in the winter garden needed tying up. He pointed to his watch. "It's time for security to make its rounds. I noticed strange surges in the power grid this afternoon, voltage spikes, as if someone were throwing an electric rock into the network. Check all the cameras in the old wing." Sophia nodded. The idea of turning the villa into an open-air art space meant that the old service tunnels had to be made safe. While guests wandered through the impressionist halls, the basement still held the shadows of Wallace's old games. She entered the security room in her volunteer uniform, a dark green jacket with the Foundation's logo. The old porter, whom she now called Aldo, turned on an additional monitor. Squares blinked on the mat screen. 108 cameras inside the villa, 24 outside. 10 cells went out and lit up for no apparent reason. This was the electric stone. "Someone's playing with the cables," Aldo muttered. "We're switching to backup." But if this is deliberate sabotage, the lights will soon go out even here. Sophia remembered her grandfather's words. Secrets love darkness as much as insects love a lamp. She asked Aldo to show her the map of the underground cable ducts. In the red circle, corridor D12 blinked, an unused branch leading to the surf caves. It was from there that she and Marco had fled, carrying the diaries. 2203. The lights in the modernist hall flickered slightly, but the string quartet's music continued. The guests considered the effect part of the show. The performance artist had performed Breathing of the House, and laughter rolled across the lagoon of candles. Sophia, on the other hand, felt her heart skip a beat. She went up to the second floor to the portrait gallery, where that very photo of the girl hung. Downstairs she could hear the chords of Schumann. Here, silence was pouring out. At that moment, the lamp under the ceiling flared up and burned out. A chill blew in the corridor, although the air conditioners were turned off. Sophia looked back. A shadow flashed in the silver frame of the mirror, as if someone had passed behind her. She turned sharply. No one. Memory shot adrenaline, the smell of kerosene, a torn check, night dust. Has the hunt really begun again? Marco met her at the service elevator, holding a bunch of new RFID cards. "The generator is behaving like a wild horse," he said. There's a chance that the previous owners forgot the second hidden input. I'm going to check the basement. I'm with you. Sophia didn't argue. They went down to level 3, where the walls smelled of dampness. Passage D12 was locked with a grate. The lock gleamed with fresh chrome. Marco applied the card. Refusal. Sophia took out the brass SL key, which was kept on a chain. Clank. The lock obediently opened. Who changed the lock but left the core of the old system? Marco was surprised. Only the one who remembered the key could work. The D12 corridor greeted them with a draft and fireflies of dust. The wooden panels were rotten, but a new cable ran along the floor, firmly secured with plastic ties. The cable led to a niche where the service elevator had once been. Now there was a small metal box with a blinking yellow light and an antenna there, a cellular repeater. Marco frowned. Such a gray transmitter could jam cameras and send a pulse to the network. On the lid was a stamp from a Belgrade service company. Sophia immediately thought of 2 Eastern Europeans with sleeping gas, so their network was not working alone. He unscrewed the lid. Inside was a board, a battery, and a small flash card. Marco carefully removed the power supply. The light went out. At that moment, a sound reminiscent of a pipe hitting a wall was heard in the distance. Sophia tensed up. Was it the echo of her own footsteps? 23 Nakaoshi. As the couple were walking back, the light in the corridor flickered, and for a second everything was plunged into absolute darkness. A chill ran out of the darkness, as if a 30-degree wind had passed over her skin. Sophia instinctively recoiled, turned on the flashlight of her phone. The beam picked out the silhouette of a man in a dark balaclava, only 3 meters away. The silhouette rushed to the side, hit the cable with his shoulder, sparks flew. Marco rushed after him. The corridor D12 forked. The fugitive chose the left shoulder, where the old elevator shaft was, and Marco the right. Sophia was left between 2 shadows, with a lantern and a key. Suddenly, the ventilation roared. Someone turned on the emergency fans, and a draft sucked in clouds of dust, extinguishing the light. Sophia dropped to one knee. She could hear Marco shouting her name in the distance, and the metallic screeching of staples coming from the shaft. She decided to move towards Marco, but tripped over a wooden box. Inside was an old medical thermometer, but broken. Instead of mercury, there was a film with red paint, and under the glass was a piece of paper. 30 degree will be too low. Someone's sick joke. Her hands began to tremble, but Sophia pulled herself together and climbed back into the tunnel. Meanwhile, upstairs, Aldo noticed that the basement cameras had gone dark again. He gave a general signal to security, and the guests were politely invited to move to the central atrium for a little fire suite. Marco had rehearsed the threat and cover story in advance. No one panicked. Sophia climbed the narrow stone steps that led straight to the main courtyard. Here the wind was blowing the garlands, and the building seemed like giant lungs. Marco was already there, out of breath, his shirt pocket torn off. Gone. He exhaled. There's no one upstairs, but I found this. He showed a small access badge with the logo of the granite firm Credito Tirreno, Wallace's local financial partners. So the hunt continues, said Sophia. He may be in prison, but his pieces are still on the board. The silence of the courtyard was broken by the sharp smell of smoke. Marco looked up. Black smoke was pouring out of the kitchen window. Fire? They rushed inside. There was no flame in the kitchen, but plastic gloves were burning on the stove. Someone had deliberately set them on fire to get the staff out and distract the security. They need space, Marco said. While we're putting out the trash, they're looking for a way to take the archive. Sophia remembered the ribbons scattered in the mirror gallery. The archive was the main prize. It contained not only diaries but also original letters, copies of bank transfers. 0005. They split up. Marco went to the server room to raise the second branch of cameras. Sofia went to the library to make sure the safe was still intact. She ran along the corridors, and every step echoed in her head like a drum. Around the corner, a 100-year-old knight's mannequin frightened her with its shadow. She remembered how the guides joked at the rehearsal. A mannequin in armor is a guard for the lost. Now he looked like a real warrior. The library door was wide open, the lock ripped out of the frame. Inside it was a mess. Shelves were scattered, books were strewn about. The safe was open but empty. On the floor, the same red paint from the thermometer had painted the word "Checkmate." Sofia felt the world tilt. The valuable originals were gone. So the hunters had made it in time. But if the safe was open, did they find the biometric data? Or was one of the guards a traitor? Sofia noticed traces, small glass chips and oil stains, the kind of signature left by the boots of technical staff, soaked in grease. The trail led to the mirrored staircase. The whole house seemed to hold its breath. She called Marco on the radio. "The safe is empty. I am walking along the bell tower corridor." "I see cameras," he replied. "Two silhouettes, heading towards the grotto." "I'm cutting the lock. I'll meet you at the exit." As Sofia ran down the stairs, the mirrors multiplied her reflection, each face a little more frightened. Sweat rolled down her temples. The footsteps of the fugitives could be heard from below. She sped up. A draft hit from outside. The grotto door was open. The moon illuminated the dock where the boat was moored, the same one they had left on. Two people were bustling about at the stern, one broad-shouldered in a blue jacket, the other thin, wearing a mask. Between them was a black container shaped like a safe. "Stop!" Sofia shouted so loudly that her voice broke. They reacted instantly. The mask was torn off his face. It was a young security guard named Luca, whom Sofia had hired 2 weeks ago. The second was one of those Eastern Europeans. Luca threw the box, pushed the boat into the sea, and jumped. The second one managed to start the engine. The boat was tearing away from the pier when Marco, stone-faced, appeared from the shadows, holding his grandfather's harpoon pistol. He took aim and fired. The harpoon sank into the wooden side, and Marco kept the end of the rope. The boat jerked, but the rope got tangled up in the winch. Sofia grabbed the rope, her muscles burning. The boat turned, spraying salt water into her face. Luca screamed, trying to cut the rope with his knife. Marco yanked the winch back. The boat hit the dock with its side, and Luca fell into the water. The other one stepped on the gas. The engine howled, but backwards. Splash. The boat crashed into a boulder and stopped. The container fell to the deck. The lid tore off, books raining down on the boards like a flock of birds. Red and blue covers, tapes, discs, it was all inside. But on top lay a strange, thin volume embossed with the words Fons Umbrae. Sofia picked it up. Inside were lists of names, dates, amounts, perhaps a network of buyers of stolen children. She wasn't the only one involved. Luca, who had crawled out onto the boulder, smiled palely. "You don't understand. There are those who don't need your truth. They will come again." Marco tied up the guard with zip ties. The police were already hurrying. The second fugitive disappeared into the darkness, wounded but free. The sea hid him like many secrets. 03:45. The safe was returned to the library, the door reinforced. The prosecutor and forensic experts worked all night. Sofia sat on the steps of the stairs, clutching the Fons Umbrae. It was a map of hell, underground maternity hospitals, changing documents, reports on the viability of babies. A world that the newspapers did not write about. "The house is not only yours," Marco said, putting his hand on his shoulder. "It is now a beacon for those who are lost. We have found an entrance to the catacombs of other people's lives, and the light has burst forth." Sophia looked into the stained glass window. Dawn was being born. Shades of coral and gold flowed down the marble walls, turning the blood of the night into a watercolor of hope. "So we're still in the middle of the journey," she whispered. "The hunt in the corridors is not the finale, but the first act of a larger process." She stood up and walked along the gallery. The portrait of the girl in the red coat greeted her with quiet joy. Now in the reflection, Sophia saw not fear, but strength. Behind the glass was her yesterday, in front of it was her tomorrow. At noon, the villa reopened to visitors. No one noticed the shadows running around here during the night. Guides talked about modernists, children laughed by the fountain, and a veteran violinist played an old waltz serenade. In the basement, electricians were pulling out the gray transmitter, and guards were strengthening the locks. On the wall of corridor D12, Sophia ordered a new sign to be hung. "The Hall of Hope." Dedicated to those who were lost but found. Marco lit an Edison bulb there, a warm amber light that does not go out even if phase B is turned off. And somewhere beyond the horizon a new storm was brewing, but the villa had already learned to breathe, with every tile, every mirror, every corridor. And Sophia knew the hunt in the corridors was over. Now the light would hunt. Damn, forward too. A scarlet dawn broke over the Ligurian Sea, as if the heavens had lit the marble altar, especially for a new chapter in the history of Villa Lancaster. The night had passed without alarm, but the corridors still smelled of burnt plastic from burning gloves, and the sea grotto of salty fear. Sophia stood by the huge window of the music room and watched the moonlight fade on the water. In her right hand was a Fons Umbre notebook, in her left a cup of the strongest rasaf, a mixture of espresso, cardamom, and a drop of rum, which the cook Rosa made when the house needed a boost of spirits. Marco approached as silently as a garden panther. The paint under his fingernails indicated that he had worked all night, reinforcing cable ducts, closing the D12 shaft. His tool bag hung over his shoulder like a shield. 8 hours until the hearing. The prosecutor is taking evidence, he said. Luca is giving evidence. The masked man. Word leaks out that he was found off the coast, wounded. The doctors are silent. Sophia tore her gaze away from the horizon. We can strengthen the walls, but we need a voice louder than the sirens. They knew that the death of the Wallace system was just prologue. To stop the avalanche of child trafficking that Fons Umbrae had unleashed, they would have to make it public, and for that, a requiem, not mourning but remembering names. Zion 9:10. A wind blew into Sophia's office, bringing newspapers. Journalists had found 3 families whose children had disappeared between 2000 and 2003. On the front page of La Repubblica was the slogan, "They could have come back." In the photo, an elderly couple was holding a pale portrait of their son. Sophia read the article. The disappearance was linked to a private clinic in Milan, run by one of the charities financed by Wallace's offshore company. Letizia entered with an electronic folder. Screenshots of the villa's email inbox were bursting with messages. "Our child disappeared in the same clinic. Help us find out the truth. We are ready to testify." "Do you see?" Letitia asked, her eyes shining. "The house is turning into a lighthouse. The lighthouse calls even those who chase the fire," Aldo croaked, pointing to the CCTV screen. A picket had gathered at the gate, holding signs that read, "Nessun segreto per I bambini." No secrets for children. People were demanding attention. Sophia felt like a wave was about to wash away the walls. Dialogue could be salvation. Twel liöd da ginaunk. The stage was being prepared in the central atrium. The journalists were expecting a press briefing, but Sophia had something else in mind, a memorial concert. The title, Requiem for the Heiress, is ambiguous, about herself, lost to the past but found, about the many who disappeared and never returned, about childhood which needs to sing its hatred to rest. The scene, an arch of mirrors symbolizing the corridors of loss. In the center is an empty child's chair, illuminated with soft amber. Around the chair are 37 white candles, the number of names found in the first portion of the list. Behind the mirrored arch is a string quartet and a small choir. The music is Fauré's Pi Jesu, Liga's Lux Eterna, and an original composition by the young composer Elia Andrea, one of those who grew up in an orphanage and received a scholarship from the foundation. A separate screen broadcasts the names and dates of missing children, confirmed by relatives. The production's director, Paula D'Angelo, a theater documentarian, came for free. When the truth calls, you don't need a ticket. 15:30. In the interrogation room of the prosecutor's office, Luca Bertini, 23, green eyes, still a bit of teenage fuzz on his chin, twirled a plastic cup with trembling fingers. He grew up in the San Pietro orphanage, a childhood of illnesses and long operations. 2 years ago, it was bought by a security company licensed to train problem teenagers. Through this company, he got a job with Wallace. Luca admitted that he did not know the details, but he saw the tranches, heard the instructors whisper, "The Lancaster house is a tin can. There is gold in it." The offer to steal the archive was made by the curator, Master S., a man with an Eastern European accent. For success, they promised 50,000 euros, new documents, and a pass to Canada. "I got scared after Sophia's press conference," Luca sobbed. "I began to understand that we are not robbing paintings, we are robbing lives. But it was too late." Luca gave the login to the server of Master S. On it, the prosecutor's office found correspondence with a certain Dr. Noir. The coordinates were northern Spain. Dr. Noir kept a list of products, a creepy word meaning children, and order number 118, SL girl 5 years old, 1745. Before the opening of the Requiem, Marco was checking the security. In the western corridor, he noticed a worker in a black respirator. His face was covered. On his hand was the logo Eco-San, a cleaning company hired under contract. Marco asked for the password. The worker answered with a shudder, then dropped the cart and ran. Marco grabbed the radio. "Black mask in corridor D6. Close the exits to the Winter Garden." The guards responded, but the man had disappeared. On the cart was aeration equipment. Inside was a cylinder of liquid butanol and sprayers, a timer. If it had worked, the smell would have caused the evacuation of guests, panic, windows and doors open, perfect chaos to steal the archive or cause harm. They want to disrupt the Requiem, Sophia guessed. If we give up, their darkness will win. Marco defused the timer and handed the cylinder over to the carabinieri, but the threat remained. 19th Gau. The guests have taken their seats. Judges, prosecutors, parents of missing children, musicians, local residents. The TV cameras are on air. Sophia comes out on stage in a formal green dress, the color of the garden and hope. "Good evening. Welcome to the Requiem," she began. "Tonight we light 37 candles for those whose names nearly disappeared into the archives of darkness. We will call them and the music will guide them home." As she said their first name, Angela Morelli, 2 months, the choir began with the chord Lux Eterna. The second name, Ricardo Peña, 3 weeks, and so on, all 37. The parents in the audience cried silently, mastering the metal of pain. The chamberlain showed a close-up of Sophia's hands shaking as she lit each candle, but her voice did not tremble. Behind her, an arched mirror reflected the flame, doubling the light. When the last candle was lit, the atrium door swung open. A woman in a white jacket entered, tall, gray-haired, with eyes the color of ice. She held a folder with the coat of arms of the Belgian kingdom in her hands. The guards wanted to block their way, but Letizia stopped them with a gesture. "I'm Dr. Elise Werle," the woman said. "International Baby Trafficking Investigation Team. I have evidence that the Fons Umbrae network involved dozens of doctors across Europe. Names, accounts, clinics. Your requiem is hope answered. I've come to join." The crowd held its breath. Sophia handed the doctor candle number 38. As the wick lit, the music seemed to intensify. The courtyard was filled with a new light. The requiem lasted 46 minutes. The stream was simultaneously on YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok. In total, there were 7.8 million viewers live. The like counter broke records. At the end, the choir sang Dona nobis pacem. Sophia added, "Good day to all. Write in the comments what country you are from. This story has changed us." Support the video with a like and a subscription. The truth should sound loud. The chat lit up with flags. People wrote cities. The moderators didn't have time to thank. While the audience applauded, Marco noticed movement on the third-floor balcony. The same masked man was aiming a crossbow at Sophia. Marco rushed up the stairs, but at that moment, Dr. Werle raised her hand. Her guard had come from behind and neutralized the shooter. The mask was torn off. Master S himself had come to finish off the show. The police subdued him. The crowd didn't notice. The music was thundering its finale. The mirrored arched backdrop sparkled like stained glass in a cathedral. Truth had won again on the last note. 23:10. In the press corridor, Sophia gave a short interview, her eyes still wet. "If the requiem for the heiress has sounded, it means that the lost will find their way. I was one of them. Now we are all an orchestra playing against the darkness." Doctor. Werle handed the prosecutor a flash drive containing the network database. Letizia hugged her daughter. Marco stood next to her, his eyes shining. In the garden the wind played with the candles, but not a single one went out. Aldo whispered. The house remembered their names. Ocho tu Porta San Forti. Villa fell silent. Letizia wrote in her diary, "Today we gave voice to those who were silent." They may not be here, but they teach us. The truth must sing. Sophia lit the last candle by the portrait of the girl in the red coat. The reflection was now smiling. Marco came with 2 mugs of herbal tea. They sat on the marble steps. The garden was drowning in moonlight. "What if there's another storm tomorrow?" he asked. "Then we will play a new requiem," answered Sophia. "Until not a single name remains in the shadows." Reflections of candles fluttered through the stained glass windows, and it seemed that the night was obediently retreating. Ahead was the trial, long processes, a new storm of news. But today, the requiem won. Sophia touched the harp pendant. The strings were silent, but she knew the music inside would not stop, and the House of Lancaster would no longer be silent about anything. The requiem for the heiress became a hymn, and everyone who heard it took away a spark, to light a light where other people's shadows still wander. The story continued. Sato 4:44. The grey dawn was creeping up on the roof of the Villa Lancaster when Sophia woke up from a barely audible creaking sound. A draught on the easel swayed in a draught. The night was quiet. No alarm calls from the guards, no beeping of the detectors. Only the distant cries of seagulls and the smell of wet magnolia outside the window. On the bedside table lay the court stamp with the date of today's hearing. Tribunale di Genova, caso, the Saturn III 127. It was the day when Letizia officially returned to the family tree and Sofia became the legal heiress. Marco stood up quietly, his hair disheveled from a sleepless night in the archives. He looked at his watch and exhaled. 3 hours until departure. Time to get ready. Oro 8:30. A motorcade of 3 cars was heading along the A12 towards Genoa. In the first was Prosecutor Ferretti. In the third were journalists from RAI News and the BBC. In the second were the main characters. Sofia in a cream suit, Letizia in a dark blue dress, Marco in a formal grey. The folder with the original diaries lay between them, like an extra passenger. Tunnels flashed past, each one seeming to see off phantoms of the past. Letitia held her daughter's hand. "I'm afraid of courtrooms. Your grandfather said they were the coldest there." "It will be warm there today," Sofia answered. "We'll bring a fire." So on 9:15. The courtroom was packed. Journalists stood on tiptoe to see the accused, Richard Wallace in a glass booth, his face pale as dried clay. Next to him sat Master C, real name Stefan Kovac, his hands in handcuffs. Luca Bertini, with his guards, took the witness stand. Judge Cesare Boetti opened the session. Prosecutor Ferretti presented documents, diaries, financial reports, Fons Umbrae, the testimony of Luca and Dr. Werle. The room was noisy. Sofia came out first. The oath sounded like the creak of a wing, soft and sharp at the same time. She told about the night shift, the photo of the girl, the SL key, the escape, the tapes, the requiem. Each word was a thread tying the facts into a rope. Wallace grinned as the judge took notes. When Sofia showed the harp pendant and her grandfather's notes, the courtroom fell silent, the silence thick as honey. The prosecutor asked, "What does returning your mother mean to you?" Sofia smiled. "It's not just my mother, it's every woman who has lost a child because of greed." Today, they are returning to their history. Letitia stood up, her silver hair glittering in the lamplight. She told of her flight with the artist Gabriel Green, of the clinic's blackmail, of the loss of her child. The audience listened as if they were praying. Several journalists wiped their eyes. "I left a letter in the mirrored staircase," she said, in the hope that one day the reflection would answer. It did. The judge nodded and wrote it down. Wallace's lawyer tried to play on formalities. There is no direct evidence that the girl in the photo is Sofia. At that moment, the prosecutor showed the DNA test results on the screen. Sofia Lancaster is 99.996% Letitia Lancaster's daughter. The noise in the courtroom turned into a storm of flashes. After the break, Wallace's lawyer presented new evidence, supposedly a diary in which Richard von Lancaster admits that his granddaughter is dead. But the handwriting was a facsimile, the paper no more than 5 years old. Experts immediately pointed out the forgery. The judge threw out the evidence with the words, "The games are over." 1:47 p.m. The judge read, "Richard Wallace, guilty of kidnapping a minor, financial fraud, threats to life. 25 years in prison, confiscation of property in favor of a fund to support victims of human trafficking. Stefan Kovac, 18 years for complicity." Thunderous applause roared in the courtroom. Sofia exhaled as if she had dropped a stone. Letitia cried. Marco squeezed her shoulder. The journalists were eager to ask questions, but the judge left. 15:22. An ocean of people has gathered in the square in front of the tribunal. Slogans: "Benvenuta, madre, nessun bambino invisibile." When Sofia and Letizia came out, the crowd burst into applause. A woman in the front row handed Letizia a stuffed rabbit. "My son was 2 months old when he disappeared. Take it, it's a sign of a return." Sophia took the microphone. "Good day to all. Write in the comments where you are from. Support with a like. Together we have returned the truth." The crowd laughed and cried. The live broadcast was viewed by 12 million viewers. 18. Okrish. They returned to the villa. In the evening, a ceremony took place. Letizia took the girl's portrait off the wall and hung a new one next to it. Sophia and she together, laughing in the garden. Below, a sign, "Mother's Garden." Here the meeting blooms. Aldo gave a tour to the first families whose children had not yet been found. The Hall of Hope was opened in the basement. The walls were covered with handprints of parents, and on top were navigation stars. Let the children see how we are looking for them. At dawn, Sophia and Marco sat under the arch of the mirror gallery. At their feet were sheets of paper with the foundation's plans, construction of a search center, scholarships, a hotline. "Do you think the house is ready for a new chapter?" Marco asked. "The house is ready to sing while we listen," Sophia answered. Letitia came up with cups of coffee. "The work of a lifetime lies ahead, but I am here. We are here." Sophia looked at the mirrors. The reflections were doubled. In them were she, Marco, Letitia, and a long, long column of those who would return. "Mother's return has completed the circle," she said quietly. "Now we write a new story." Marco smiled and took out a small box, a silver ring on the inside, SL and MV. Sophia gasped. We searched for the truth together. "Do you want to search further, to the end of the pages?" Sophia laughed and cried at the same time. "Yes." The house will be a witness. In the evening, the first children of the new residential orphanage arrived at the villa to draw, write music, and shoot films. Sophia greeted them on the porch, holding an Edison lamp. Marco stood nearby, smiling. Letizia conducted a string quartet in the garden. The portrait of the girl in the red coat was now part of the interactive exhibition Lost and Found. Each visitor could write a letter to their past and leave it under the frame. Sophia wrote, "I'm back," and put it in a golden box. The lantern soared into the sky, even brighter than the first evening. The journalist's camera flew off in a drone shot. A cliff, a villa, a garden, the sea. Fresh letters were white on the stone, Villa Verita. The story ends to begin again, with every heart that is not afraid to search, and every mother who found her way home. If you like this story, support the video with a like, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments what struck you the most.